I think server components has really like changed the game on a lot of these things. Like when I was implementing my stuff, MDX, like every MDX library out there, like almost doesn't make sense in the new paradigm because they all do all this like crazy juggling of like, oh, I'm going to do some stuff over here. And then now you have a bundle I pass to another thing and it does all this stuff. It's just everything is kind of just so wonderfully simple in a server components context where it's like, have my content, make it into components, stream the thing.
Yeah, it's great with the like being able so that's another component in OmniDoc is you get it's called MDX content. And if you need to just render MDX content, which in the case of kind of going back to where like these tools get complicated because they're either not working together or they're trying to take all these concerns for themselves. I use this MDX content component within the quick info that you get from the TypeScript compiler. So the TypeScript compiler will give me back your JS doc information. So if you have a description, and most people will put markdown in that, we need to render that markdown out. And so, these solutions are doing that for you on the other side. You don't know, but that all like starts to add up to these performance hits, and where it can get just really like tedious to build these things. And so you can just use this MDX content component and render a little bit of MDX. And then going back to the collections, you can hit a wall with that too with MDX. Trying to render MDX specifically with server components where you don't have your bundler anymore. So now when I need to import images, or not even import images, import another component, you kind of lose out on all those niceties of it. And that was something when I was at Frame again, like my product manager, he was like, I want to import an image here. And I was like, well, we don't do that because, we're just rendering MDX. Then I was like, but I'll figure it out. I'll figure out how to do it. And so then I'm trying to like get ES build to run and bundle everything. And it just becomes a mess. And so that's why with OmniDoc, I'm really just trying to find a nice balance of again, meet you where you're at. If you want to work within your module system, you can, and you can get all the benefits of image optimization that like Next.js gives you, or whatever Vite can give you, things like that. I don't want to constrain you too much, and just help facilitate you writing documentation, because we need everybody to write good documentation.
So you can render these code examples, but I didn't find anywhere in the docs that's like kind of like running them. So like, can you also run the code examples or is it just like strictly display?
I did have a preview component, is what I was calling it, and I pulled it out for now just because it wasn't. I was running into performance issues with that as well, trying to figure out like a nice balance there. And so I'm telling people to go to use like their module system for this very thing to like render out an example. And so the way you do that is with a collection. A collection gives you back some of your module data, and you get back like the default export if you want it. So if you're trying to render MDX, for example, you can point it to a file pattern and say, go grab all of these posts in a directory, and it will give you back a helper method that is what is called a source. And in a source, you can get your default export, you can get a named export. So that's how you can target front matter. So if your MDX is exporting a front matter variable, which there's some tools for this, like rehype plugins that you can, or I think remark plugins, that will take your front matter, get rid of it, and then re-export it as a variable. Now that's a named export that's coming out of that module. And so you can use this collection mechanism to type check that front matter. And you can also use it to render that front matter however you see fit. And so this is where it becomes really powerful compared to, I think, other solutions. Like I'm working with your module system. So now you can kind of was like a epiphany to me as I was building it. I was like, oh, whoa, like now I can type check anything. I don't have to just type check my front matter. I was trying to these concerns in before and realized that it wasn't, it, or it was fine. It's like similar solutions though. I was like, well, I'm just kind of building the same thing that exists out there. And so again, yeah, trying to find that nice API layer where it can empower folks rather than hinder you at all.
When you're talking about type checking here, like specifically for the front matter, is it sort of similar to how Astro defines collections and that you like define like a Zod schema or something, and then it's using that to check it? Or are you actually doing something to like pull that information out and like actually feed it directly to the TypeScript compiler? Like how's that like mechanically work?
Yeah, so it's very similar to Astro's collections, but it does not use Zod, so it uses TypeScript to do that. And I think I'll have some sort of schema mechanism there, so our validation mechanism that you can plug in Zod if you're using that. Um, but right now, there's a generic argument that you can pass, and so talking about collections again, that's where you can type check your content. So you can say, hey, my front matter, or again any export for that matter, looks like this shape. It doesn't look like that shape. Throw an error. And I do use the TypeScript compiler to do that. So I make sure that it's not like it will type check against those.
That's really cool though. That's pretty huge actually, because this is like a general problem and something I've wanted better from TypeScript and like overall is, I know we're talking about like having an MDX file here and you have some control transformations. You can just do more things with it. You can like have an intermediate step where you transform it to a kind of TypeScript or something and then run the compiler against it. But I wish like you could just write a type definition for a module file in TypeScript. Uh, that would be so huge because there's often times where you're like, yeah, look, you can give me a module, but I want a module of this shape. But there's not an easy way right now to like actually do that in TypeScript. There are like things you can do that are kind of like hacks and workarounds, but it would be really nice were that a thing. So this approach sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to your point there, that's exactly what it is. It allows you to type your module, and so and make sure that it's expecting exports from it, or maybe if there's a default export and you shouldn't have a default export, you can throw an error on that. And so it was kind of this thing that I landed on in the midst of iterating through this API, trying to just make it a little bit easier to use. And I was like, well, I still can type check front matter, and then I was like, oh crap, like yeah, I can type check the whole module now. Like I can make sure. One thing I was saying, like the stories or examples, you want to render an example of everything. I can make sure there's just only named exports in this file. And if there's a default export, or even with your story, like if you still want to use Storybook, like their DSL for how they, is it the component story format, you could strongly type that and make sure that it follows a certain paradigm. So I'm really excited about this like new collections concept that's emerged from this.
So one last thing before we move on to Restyle, another library that fell out of your open source work, the common story we all have. But one thing the docs seem to call a lot is routing. So like, how does routing like play into all of this, and why is it such a hurdle to get over?
Yeah, that's a good point. So back to the collections utility. This allows you to build those routes. So and this is just to give you full flexibility of how you want to architect your site. It's really hard. Next.js is wonderful and I love it, but it kind of doesn't meet you where you're at with content authoring. And you reach for these solutions and you're trying to find like, oh, well, I can render it in MDX or using MDX remote or all these different plugins. And so this collections paradigm allows you to just grab a module, get like the siblings of that module. So again, back to these implicit rules that we kind of come up with, like, or maybe not even implicit. There's some things where like an index file in Node is going to look at the direct, like that's like talking like about the directory. It's like meta information about the directory. And so if you look in some of these doc solutions, they come with like very specific just APIs, like new APIs. Like it's a new thing I need to learn. And so I need to add a meta file to like change the title, or I have to add this config file at the very top. I didn't even talk about that. That's something I'm really trying to fight against is there's no configuration file for OmniDoc. You just use your code and you import your code, and I will infer as much as I can off of that. So everything is co-located. That's like something, a strong principle I really believe in, is that we should keep things co-located because you can find, where it's at. You're not trying to go search through this like maze of where does something exist or is configured. And so yeah, this will build these, give you utilities to through your file system however you see fit. So you can, there's a depth parameter, for example, and you can just get the siblings at like one level. If you want to go deeper into those siblings, so like your next and previous navigations will like start to dig in that examples, you can do that. And so yeah, it just kind of gives you a framework to build a documentation site really, and even like a content site. If you just needed to do a blog or something like that, works great for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the no configuration thing is a big point because that I mean, there be dragons, right? That's all of a sudden you end up like getting way in the weeds with configuration. So yeah, I'm excited to see how that plays out. Um, Maybe let's transition on and talk about Restyle. I'm actually really excited about this. I stumbled across Restyle a little while back, and it just like seems really really interesting to me. So this is something that like came out from you're like building OmniDoc, and you're like, oh, I'll need to handle styles in this like specific way, and Restyle was born. So can you tell us more about the story and like what you're trying to accomplish with Restyle?
Yeah, absolutely. So Restyle, yeah, was born from OmniDoc. I was in the midst of OmniDoc working on the code block component and trying to figure out how to, I think it was a bug someone filed. There was a scroll bar issue where like a scroll bar was showing all weird. And I was like, dang, I need to like style this scroll bar. Well, I can't, I was doing everything with like inline styles and it's kind of wonky just to try to make it like a, I don't want to impose any opinions on you on if you want to use Tailwind or what have you, but I need some styling to get this out of the box. And I needed CSS for this thing. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? Like, this is the like problem everyone faces when they're trying to build a component that has styling that ships with it. It's why we see all these headless libraries that come out. And I just gone to React Conf and they had announced that they do this new style hoisting thing. And I was like, what the heck is this style? This is amazing. Like, oh my gosh, I can write styles in my component and they manage uh, putting that in the head when I need to with suspense. If you've looked or followed any of emotion styled components, they all have ran into these issues where just the new paradigms of React are emerging now that we have suspense fully and concurrent rendering and you run into all these issues. So to see that React had given us a solution, I was just like, oh my gosh, I need to use this. And so I built it into OmniDoc initially and realized really quickly, like, oh, this is like territory for a library, which again, I think this is where we all end up and you can go on a tangent and go too far. And I gave myself a constrained amount of time and I was like, let's just see what we can get out from like the implementation I had built in there. And and yeah, that's kind of where Restyle was born. And I was able to utilize this new style hoisting feature and gives you a kind of an atomic CSS solution. And so Restyle is, I think, most comparable to uh, I don't even know like some of the atomic solutions off the top of my head right now. I'm blinking, but yeah, it will generate your the CSS that you put in and give you a single selector out for that CSS, and then it dedupes them across the client and server, which is really cool.